Hello everybody, welcome back to another video, as today we got another episode of reviewing NHL teams off-season so far. As today we got the Boston Bruins ahead of us today, and we're also going to be joined by a special guest later on in the video. My boy John from Off the Wall Hockey will be joining us a little bit later on, which I'm very excited to talk with him and everything that was going on here with the Boston Bruins. But before we get into this, I'd like to just say, if you are new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that like button as well. That'll be very much appreciated there, guys. So let's get into talking about the Boston Bruins offseason, which they had not done a whole lot in this offseason, to say the least. It's been a pretty quiet one, to say the least, and where the only move that they really did make was the Pavel Zacha move, and that's really it. We're going to be talking about Lindholm and that extension, and also Jake DeBrusk extension in today's video as well, which I'm very excited to talk about. But the very first thing that we're going to be talking about is Jim Montgomery and how they fired Bruce Cassidy and hired a new head coach here in Jim Montgomery. Now, Montgomery is a very good coach. He only coached 2 years there for the Dallas Stars and put up a decent record there for the Stars as well. Became an assistant for the St. Louis Blues and now is back as head coach here for the Bruins. And honestly, I don't mind the move. Jim Montgomery is a very good coach, but you lose out on a very good coach also in Bruce Cassidy, who had a very good season, to say the least. Bruce Cassidy has coached the team since 2016-17, and it seemed like they definitely needed a new coach to come into the room and probably bring something a little newer. Of course, we were talking a little bit about that with Off the Wall Hockey, how he thought maybe Don Sweeney should have been fired as well, how we should have just been a cleared house, basically. Start with a new GM, start with a new head coach, and move from there, especially since right now they're really playing the waiting game here with Patrice Bergeron on whether he'll be re-signing or not, which is definitely kind of a gamble for sure, because now they're, leading it up to now we're going to have Coyle and Pavel Zacha as your 1-2 punch coming into this upcoming season, which is very worrying. So the coaching move, I don't think is a bad idea. It brings in a new face to the team, and Jim Montgomery is not a bad idea. Pretty similar coach to Bruce Cassidy as well, so not a bad move here by the Boston Bruins, but fairly surprising, especially since Bruce Cassidy has worked out pretty well with the Bruins as well. So next up, we'll move into the drafting for the Boston Bruins, which, of course, they didn't have a whole lot of picks. They didn't have any firsts. But one guy I really did like was Matthew Patrice. Pretty good pickup in him, but not a fantastic draft here by the Boston Bruins. With Matthew, they get a good skater, good playmaker, guy that could score a few goals as well. Not a bad skater as well. So good pickup here for the Boston Bruins and Matthew. But otherwise, not a whole lot of great draft picks, so not a whole lot to talk about here with the Boston Bruins draft. It was just all right, definitely not amazing compared to what it was last year with picking up Harrison and Lysell. Definitely a decent draft last year compared to what it was this year. I'll move into the trades, though, right quick, and we'll talk about the Pavel Zacha as they picked up, traded away Erik Haula and picked up Pavel Zacha. Now, this was a weird move, to say the least, a really, really weird move for the Boston Bruins, because you trade away a guy in Erik Haula who had a decent end of the season, was playing pretty good. He's not my most favorite guy in the world. I think you definitely upgraded in Pavel Zacha, but the biggest problem is with this move is that Pavel Zacha is an RFA, and he's asking for a decent amount of money, where he might be asking for more than $3 million, and in a situation where you're trying to get Patrice Bergeron and only having $4.7 million in cap, that doesn't leave you with a whole lot of cap after signing Pavel Zacha. So there's a lot of big questions with this move, and to be honest with you, I would have kept Erik Haula. Yeah, you're getting an upgrade in Pavel Zacha, but Zacha hasn't signed a contract yet. You have to sign him to that contract, and there's a lot of, mystery with Zacha. Can he really start exploding? He had a decent season this year. We had 36 points in 70 games. But is he just going to be a 30, 40-point guy every single season? You just basically picked up a Charlie Coyle 2.0, basically, in this move. And I just don't understand why they made this type of move when you already had control over Erik Haula, and Haula will most likely be cheaper than what Pavel Zacha will be this upcoming season. So a very weird move by the Boston Bruins. I see it as a W in the trade, but at the exact same time, I see it as an L, because you have to sign Pavel Zacha to a move. And at the moment where you really don't got a whole lot of cap, it's not a great move here for the Boston Bruins. Moving into the contract extensions that they did give out, though, they re-signed Hampus Lindholm to a massive 8-year, $6.5 million deal, which was a little bit of a scary move, to say the least, because of the fact that this extension is a very, very long extension. This brings him all the way until he's 36 years of age, and, you know, it's not a bad contract if you really look into the details of it. Of course, the term is absolutely dreadful. It's a long time term for Hampus Lindholm, and I love Lindholm. I think this AAV of 6.5 is absolutely amazing for Lindholm. He's a top 2 guy. He plays really well defensively, plays really well offensively, and is the type of guy you want for a defenseman. Now, the way that this contract builds out is it's pretty good buyout-wise. You'll take a look at the buyout for Hampus Lindholm. Of course, if you were to buy it out now, you'd be dealing with him for, 16+ years. But if you were to buy him out here, you don't really have to deal with a very big cap hit. It's only 3.45. Of course, right now it's a little bit better, but it's not a bad buyout. You don't have to really pay him a very big signing bonus or anything like that. You save $3 million if you have to end up buying him out, and it's, it stays at that 3.45. So not a bad move, really, when you look at it here for the Hampus Lindholm trade, if you have to end up buying him out later on down the road when you are probably going to have to rebuild here sooner or later for the Boston Bruins. And then they also re-signed Jake DeBrusk to a 2-year, $4 million deal, which I also really like it. Jake DeBrusk did really well last year, 25 goals, and did really well for the Boston Bruins near the end of the season, and was starting to find that spark. So we'll have to see how well he does under Jim Montgomery. So that's really it for the Boston Bruins. Now, of course, the biggest question is what they're going to do with Patrice Bergeron and David Kreichi. Can they bring Patrice Bergeron back in? And it's a lot to rely on. It really is, because they're relying on an older player in Patrice Bergeron to come back to the team and re-sign with them, especially since he's at 37 years of age. Is he done? Is he, actually going to come back? So it's a lot to just rely on Patrice Bergeron coming back, because if he doesn't, then this is the squad that you got to go into next season. And quite honestly, this is really not looking like a playoff team, to be quite honest with you. And oh my lord, are they ever just paying so many of these guys such big contracts in their back end of their decor as well, which is also another argument for the Hampus Lindholm move. It was a weird one because of the fact that you already got, Riley, you got Forbert, you got Grzelcyk. Of course, Grzelcyk is out for, month to month. You're also going to have Marchand not out out for the beginning of the season. Same with McAvoy. So your defense core is going to look like this starting in this upcoming season. So there's a lot of worry here for the Boston Bruins coming in this upcoming season, especially for me and especially for John, who we're going to be talking with a little bit later on. There's a lot of skepticism, if I can speak English, with the Boston Bruins, because there's a lot of worry about how this team will do going into this upcoming season, and there's a lot of worries if this team will even be a playoff team coming up this season, especially with how, well built this Atlantic Division is, with how the Detroit Red Wings are looking in this upcoming season, and especially the Ottawa Senators as well. They're starting to look really good. So there's a lot of big concern here for the Boston Bruins, and we'll have to really see what they do. But for me, honestly, this is a C-. It could improve with Patrice Bergeron signing, but this is a big fat C- for me on my part. I'm really not a big fan of the way that the Boston Bruins handled their offseason and relying everything on Patrice Bergeron and him re-signing, because if he doesn't, this is not going to be a good center core. It really isn't, especially if you're having to rely on both Coyle and Zacha. It's not going to be good. This is exactly not what you wanted for the Boston Bruins. So there's a lot of concern here for the Bruins coming in this upcoming offseason. But for now, guys, I'm going to end the video here. Thank you very much for watching. And I'm actually not ending the video. I don't know what I'm saying. We're going to head off to John for the interview with him. Do not click off the video. We still got a little bit more left. I am absolutely just not stoned. I'm not even stoned. I'm just, for some reason, thinking the video is about to end. But let's head off to the interview with my boy John. Enjoy it, and yeah, enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the reviewing every team's offseason. As throughout these videos, I'm going to be having special guests, and my very first special guest of the series is my boy John from Off the Wall Hockey. How's it going, bro?
It's going pretty well. Excited to be on, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, so the first little part of the video, I went and reviewed the team, and honestly, I wasn't a big fan of this team's offseason. Firing a really good coach in Bruce Cassidy, doing a trade that now they have to probably pay the guy more money than what they traded out in Eric Kalla, and they have a defensive core that is filled with a lot of money right now. So we're going to get into all that. But thank you, John, for hopping in. And let's get into the very first topic of the offseason, which I think was the biggest thing, was the firing of Bruce Cassidy and hiring Jim Montgomery, who was the head coach for the Dallas Stars and was the assistant for the St. Louis Blues over the past 2 years. Did great in university, didn't do that bad for the Dallas Stars. What do you think? And were you upset when you heard Bruce Cassidy got fired?
That whole situation was very complicated. I I like Montgomery. I honestly I think he can do a good job here. And he's a guy that I think is obviously going to bring a different style and a new voice to the locker room. And based on what's been talked about around here, or near Boston, is that Cassidy may have kind of worn out his welcome in that locker room. And as good of a coach as he was, in as many games as he won, it seemed like the players were kind of turning on him, including the big topic was Patrice Bergeron. And obviously you have a lifelong Bruin captain of the team. If he doesn't like the coach, there's a good chance that coach isn't going to last much longer. What I was surprised about is that they didn't send Don Sweeney packing with Cassidy, because I thought if Cassidy goes, Sweeney would be gone too, and they'd kind of go into this complete reset and start over, or at least try and get some new people in there to run things. And when they kept Sweeney and didn't keep Cassidy, which I don't think coaching was the biggest reason why the Bruins were losing in the early in the playoffs, but I was a little caught off guard by Sweeney still being here and Cassidy not. But I do think that Cassidy kind of wore out his welcome in that locker room, and that's probably the biggest reason why they decided to move on.
And that was the big thing. Like, Bruce Cassidy's been there since 2016-17 when he took over the team, and he's been there for a long time. And yeah, I agree. Like, you would think that both of them would move out, because I think the Bruins are going to be going into a new direction right now, especially with, the mystery of Patrice Bergeron and David Kreichi, which we'll be getting into a little bit later on. And those two guys, because you guys really have no centermans right now. You guys got like your best two centermans right now is Coyle and Pavel Zacha.
Yeah.
And that's not really a great look, which I guess we could get into the next topic, which is Pavel Zacha. You guys picked him up. I think it was right before the draft. And you guys traded Eric Haula for Pavel Zacha, which I like the move. Eric Haula was okay, but you're picking up a good player in Pavel Zacha. The problem is Zacha didn't have any contract, is okay, but now he's asking for maybe even more than $3 million. And especially with the cap crunch that you guys are in, you don't got a lot of money to move around. So what's your thoughts on the move there?
I didn't understand this at all, because Eric Haula in the second half of last season actually was very good as the Bruins 2C. And, he got off to a very, very slow start, as a lot of the new guys in Boston did last year. But in the second half of the year, they looked like a new team. And he played very well with David Pastrnak and Taylor Hall. And, obviously, he's not a guy that you want as a long-term option. But as a filler in that position, when they needed somebody to step up, he was the guy to step up. So I don't know why they went into this offseason with feeling like they needed to get rid of him in the first place, because I thought he played very well and probably was going to have a solid year this year. Zacha, I've never been enamored with. He's never lived up to his draft status. He's another 2015 guy that has not turned out like he was supposed to. He's a decent player. He's still younger. He's same age as Bruss, so he's got that little bit of upside still, maybe, but I just didn't see the point in bringing in this question mark in Pavel Zacha, who's not only a question mark on the ice, but is now a question mark as far as cap hit goes, for a player that was a solid veteran guy who only had this coming season left on his deal anyway, at a fairly cheap cap hit of $2.1 million. So that move, to me, I did not understand.
Well, especially when you have Eric Haula already locked up and you're already dealing with a cap crunch. Why do you want to move out a cap player that's already has a decent contract for a guy that you're now having to deal with arbitration with? And you might have to give him big money. I mean, I think I was hearing his arbitration. We don't know the arbitration file just yet, but he's probably going to be asking for around $3 million, maybe even more than that, which the Bruins right now, they don't have a whole lot of money in their cap. They only have about $4.7 million, which is not a whole lot of cap to really fluctuate, especially when you're still wanting to bring back Bergeron and Kreichi
Yep.
maybe as well, which we can talk about some other big contracts that they signed before the offseason
Mm-hmm.
on Hampus Lindholm and Jake DeBrusk. Now, I
Yep.
wasn't the biggest fan of the Hampus Lindholm extension. I love Hampus Lindholm. I think he's a phenomenal defenseman. I think he'll be great for the Boston Bruins, but 8 years at 6.5 is definitely a steep contract for the guy. And also, you guys have a lot of defensemen that are making over $3 million.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's your thought process on the defensive core? And what do you think Sweeney's trying to do?
I actually love them bringing Lindholm in, and I
Yeah,
was
oh,
fine
yeah.
with the extension because I think he's the perfect partner for Charlie McAvoy.
Yeah.
And I think if you have those two playing together, that you've got a top pair
Oh,
that
yeah.
is going to be one of the best in the league. So I was fine with them with the whole Lindholm thing. I think they're paying more depth guys just way too much money. Like
Mhm.
Derek Forbert, I love the
Yeah.
guy. He's one of those, hardworking, very big, just penalty killer, like my kind of player, but playing him $3 million a year is like double what he should be
Oh,
making.
yeah.
Brandon Carlo was garbage last year.
Yeah.
And that really frustrated me as a Bruins fan because he just got a long-term extension last offseason.
Mhm.
And, he got paid to be a legitimate top 4 guy, and he's supposed
Yeah.
to be kind of one of their shutdown defensive guys. He was trash last season. So they need a heck of a lot more out of Brandon Carlo. The depth guy, like Forbert's contract is too big. He should be making 1.5, maybe 2 max, not 3. I think
Mhm.
that's where a lot of your issues come in. Lindholm and McAvoy, I think, are getting paid about what they're worth.
Yeah.
Obviously, McAvoy would finish top 5 in Norris voting this past season.
Oh, yeah.
The big issues on the back end for me is that Grzelcyk is injured. McAvoy
Yeah.
is going to be out for the first few months. Mike Riley had offseason surgery. Riley's another guy that I think is overpaid along with Forbert, like where some of those depth guys are kind of causing some of the cap issues. Like they're not going to have Grzelcyk and McAvoy on that back end to start next year. That's 2 major top 4 pieces out
Oh,
before the
yeah.
season even begins. And then they're missing more up front, which we can get into as well if you'd like. But
Yeah.
Marchand not being there for at least the first like half of next season is going to be brutal
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. I mean, the injuries are hitting the Bruins a little hard. That's why almost you got to go into a little mini retool. And I
Yeah.
guess we could talk about the Bergeron and Kreichi situation as well. We don't really know really what's going on
Yeah.
with those two, if they're going to return or what's going to happen. But do you think Bergeron and Kreichi are going to return for the Boston Bruins, and how will they be able to fit it underneath the cap?
They're gonna, if they do come back, somebody's getting traded. I can promise you there's
Oh,
no
yeah.
other way around it. Somebody's getting sent out of here. And I'm more confident in Bergeron coming back, but the fact that we're into August now and it's not done, I'm
Mhm.
getting more and more concerned by the day. Because I thought that was going to be a thing where it was pretty simple. He signs a 1-year deal early
Yeah.
in the offseason and it's set. And we're now over a month into the offseason, and it's still nobody knows what's going on. So that's very concerning to me. Kreichi, I think, is more of a long shot, but I think
Yeah.
if Bergeron does come back, there could be a pull from him and Marchand to be like, hey, one more season, come back. Let's take one last crack at it. Because everybody knows that this is pretty much the last crack for the
Oh,
Bruins
yeah.
anyway. So, they might have that pull to take one last shot at it and get Kreichi to come back if Bergeron does come back. If Bergeron doesn't, then why would Kreichi? He's no chance. So,
Mhm.
I'm at this point starting to get fairly concerned with that because Boston has done nothing else this offseason, almost banking on Bergeron being back. And if he doesn't come back, the Bruins are in a lot of trouble as far as down the middle is concerned.
Oh, huge trouble, especially if you're gonna have to rely on both Zaka and Coyle to be your number one
Charlie
and
Coyle
number
becomes
two.
your 1C.
Yeah, and
Like, are you
that's
kidding
not
me?
good.
Are
That
you
is not
kidding me?
good.
No, I'm
Eh,
pessimistic.
and then we could get
Ugh,
into one last signing, which I
yeah.
kind of like this one too. Jake DeBrusk signed a 2-year extension, which was a guy that was asking for a trade out a while ago, kind of
Yep.
changed around, played really good last year as well, had
Yeah.
25 goals. What's your thoughts on that contract signing as well?
Well, he was another guy that had issues with Cassidy, and I think now that Cassidy is gone, I think he is probably going to be happier here. Is I think he's like said that he's good with staying now that things went well for him last season. He had a tough couple years before that.
Hmm.
But last year he bounced back and, again, second half of the season, Boston was so good in the second half of the season. He started putting the puck in the net regularly, consistently, which is the one thing that we were always frustrated with Jake DeBrusk about, is that he couldn't consistently produce. Last season, he put, 20 plus goals, finally getting to that level that we were expecting him to be. I hope he can do that again this year. I'm expecting him to do that again this year because, with these injuries, he's going to play a top 6 role on this team without
Oh yeah.
question. So I'd like to see him push 25 plus, maybe even 30 goals this season. I hope that he and Montgomery can get off to a good relationship with,
Hmm.
the new coach coming in. And I'm expecting a good season from Jake DeBrusk, and the Bruins are desperately going to need a good season from Jake DeBrusk. And honestly, I'm glad that he was, able to, willing to sign that deal and able to come back. And I think, he's going to play a big role this year for sure.
I think so too. I've been always a big fan of Jake DeBrusk. When I heard the trade rumors, I wish he came down to the Edmonton Oilers,
Hmm.
but now he's really popping off there in Boston, and I'm happy to see that. So let's get into the grading of this offseason. That's the big part of the series, is we grade everyone. And
Yeah.
I'm probably going to give this team, quite honestly, a C minus. They did, not bad with the Lindholm. It's a little long, but you're getting
Yeah.
a top
It's
two
definitely long.
defenseman, right? You're taking it all the way until you're 36. But right now, I think the Bruins are looking at short term.
Yeah.
They'll deal with the Lindholm contract when it comes to it. And the way that contract builds out as well is that it's really heavy up front and then it
Hmm.
lowers down later on down the road. So it is kind of a buyout friendly contract where
Yeah.
if you do need to buy them out, you can. So what do you grade the Boston Bruins in this past offseason?
It's tough to say without knowing what happens with
Right?
Bergeron, because I think if Bergeron comes back, I think you could get him up to like a C plus, B
Yeah.
minus type off season.
Yeah.
Where if Bergeron doesn't come back and this team's left with no centers, this is literally like a D. Like
Oh
they're
yeah.
they're done. They might as well give up on next year if Bergeron doesn't come back at
Yeah.
this point. And that to me reflects pretty poorly on Don Sweeney, which is one of the reasons, reverting back to the beginning of the video when I said I was surprised that Sweeney wasn't canned along with Cassidy, was because your general manager has put this team in a position where you're relying on an offseason decision of a 37-year-old center to
Yeah.
basically decide whether this team is still playoff relevant or not next season. And
Mm-hmm.
that, I think, is the biggest issue with where Boston's at right now, is roster wise, that they're completely reliant on Bergeron to basically decide their offseason. So right now, I'll say C. I think it goes up if Bergeron comes back, and if he
Yeah.
doesn't, it goes way down to basically a D.
I agree with you. Bergeron is the big deciding point on what will happen. And we only got a few months, or actually like only really a month
Yeah.
and a half left before we get into the training camp. So this is a big pivotal month to see what will happen with Bergeron. And it looks like Kaichi is going to be coming off the free agency list here
Yeah.
very soon as well, from what we've been hearing. So there's not going to be a lot of options for the Boston Bruins the fall back on if Bergeron ends up not resigning. But thank you, John, for hopping in. Would you like to shout out anything that you'd like to shout out there?
Yeah, no, just off the wall hockey on YouTube. Gonna have a lot of streams coming up this season, doing a lot of
Oh
games,
yeah.
covering the whole NHL. So hockey fans are welcome, and we'd love to have you join the community.
Yeah, go check out Off the Wall Hockey. His link is down in the description below. Go check him out. He does some amazing content. I made a video with him not too long ago
Yep.
talking about the Edmonton Oilers. So make sure to go check him out. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys all in the next one. Adios, amigos.